If you judge a book by its color, hey, it's a good line. Come on, I had to say it. I had to say it.
Welcome to Keep It Fictional, a weekly podcast for book lovers by book lovers. Build your to-be-read list with Sadie, Liz, Virginia, Fiona, and Corrine from the Port Moody Public Library. Warning, this podcast contains strong opinions and may cause an increase in your library holds list.
Hello and welcome to Keep It Fictional, the book podcast from the Port Moody Public Library. My name is Sadie and I'm your host today, and I'm joined by my book friends, Corrine and Virginia. Now, we pick our topics on this podcast for a variety of reasons. Sometimes we have a book that we've been wanting to read, and so we pick a theme that will give us a chance to read it. Or we're wanting to stretch or diversify our reading, and so we pick a theme that will push us to read something new. And sometimes we pick a theme that allows us to really read anything that we want because that theme is so broad, and so we're not forced to read any one specific genre. I have to say that this was kind of my motivation for this week's topic. A book with your favorite color for its cover. Now, maybe we were drawn to the book because of the color, or maybe we wanted to read it for other reasons, and the fact that the color was our favorite was just kind of a happy accident. Now, I'm curious what the reason was for my book friends, and we will see. But before we get to the books, I want to know, was this topic as freeing and flexible for my two book friends as I had hoped it would be, or did you struggle to find a book for this week even more or more so than you did in other weeks?
So here's the deal. As you know, I read the books the night before, and I had kind of misinterpreted this topic in a pretty big way in that I thought it had to have a color in the title. And so there I was at 10 o'clock at night, furiously speed reading The Color Purple. And then I texted something to Virginia. She's like, oh, well, this topic should be really easy. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, this is really hard. Like, I had to really go through all of Libby and try to find something. And then she was like, well, no, the topic is just, like a book that the cover is your favorite color. And I was like, so I closed The Color Purple and just picked up a book that I really love. That honestly, I do love the color combination on the cover of this. And so in some ways it was difficult because I didn't read correctly. And in some ways it was very easy.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. What about you, Virginia? It sounds like you did read correctly as to what the topic was. Did you find it easy to find a book for this week?
I do consult that spreadsheet religiously, so I think yes. And I remember mentioning to Corrine what the topic was last week already. So, I tried my best. Anyway, I think there are enough books that has this particular color on the cover that I was just like, okay, this is going to be, it's more like a choice of like, well, which one do I want to read? And also I was trying to look for one that has like the most of that color on the cover rather than just like one that has a little bit. And so, yeah, I think it's fairly easy, I think, this week. So, yeah, thank you, Sadie.
You did absolutely warn me. And for some reason, it didn't actually stick in my brain. You're like, oh, it'll be easy. And just whatever the book is, just make it up. And I was like, really? But how would you do that? It has to have a color in the title. To your credit, you tried as hard as you could. I have no one to blame but myself.
It happens. It's okay. And now you've read some of The Color Purple. So you can say that.
I feel so ashamed that I haven't read it. And it's a book that I've always meant to get to, but I do not think it's a book that you're supposed to try to speed read through.
You might not be able to get all of the nuances and the importance of, it's true. It's true. Well, thank you for sharing, both of my book friends. I too definitely found this, same as Virginia, quite an easy one. I didn't necessarily have a pile of books that I was going to choose from, but once I kind of searched for books with certain colors on them, there were quite a few options that I had. So that was good. So we're going to go actually to Virginia first today. So Virginia, what is this magical color that you had stacks of books waiting for you to read?
Well, I feel like if there's anyone on staff that no one really should have a problem saying what their favorite color is, I'm probably one of them, because black, wear the color every day. To the point where if I wear a color shirt, and by color, I mean like a gray shirt, people will comment on it. They'll just be like, what are you doing today? If I can have black everything, I would probably. The world, unfortunately, doesn't work that way. I don't think specifically I seek out books with black covers. I do appreciate the aesthetic, especially like a matte black cover. It looks great. Last week, of course, I talked about Blackouts by Justin Torres, which have a stellar black cover, one of the best I've seen. And this week I try to find, as I mentioned earlier, another black cover book that have as much black as possible, just a little bit of like other spot color in it. And that is what I've got for you today. Is The Blizzard by Vladimir Sorokin, translated by Jamey Gambrell. Sorokin is having a bit of a year. 2 of his books were published earlier this year by MYRB, Red Pyramid, a collection of short stories, and also Blue Lard, which is the novel that contains the infamous sexual relationship between Joseph Stalin and Nikita Khrushchev. You can tell that his type of books, no stranger to his books being banned in his country. Blue Lard led to people filing like criminal charges against him, saying that his book is contaminating Russian literature. The youth group, the pro-Putin youth group, Walking Together, was so disgusted at how obscene his books are that they created a giant toilet and they rip his books apart and throw them into the toilets. And that's the kind of books that he does, so very, very well known for his satire and the absurdity in his work. Sorokin is also very outspoken against the invasion of Ukraine. And so he has not lived in Russia for the last couple of years. I bought a couple of his books and hoping to get to them earlier this year. I didn't. And the reason why I was hoping that I would be able to read some of his other books first, because they sound totally banana pants. And I think they would be a really good way for me to meet this particular author. Unfortunately, I didn't get to them. So I'm starting with this one instead because it's got a black cover. And just like Sadie said earlier, just an excuse for me to read this author. And it sounds like this would be a little bit more of a gentle introduction to his kind of writing, his thinking, a little bit less banana pants, but probably just relatively speaking. So our story starts with a rather unpleasant man rudely demanding passage. He's asking these strangers that he only just met in the village to drive him to another village. Because his horses, they were too exhausted, they won't go anymore, and so now someone needs to drive him to Dogoi, this other village. Someone else must help him continue his trip. Let's go. It's imperative that we leave now. This man is Platon Ilyich Garin, a doctor. And okay, maybe he does have a good reason for this urgency because he's carrying a vaccine that he needs to deliver as soon as possible to Dogoi so that he can administer that to those who are not yet infected by the plague. A plague that has been turning everybody into zombies. Now, okay, a pause here. I know you heard the word zombies, but without spoiling anything, just trust me. Don't worry about it. Forget about the zombies part. Not important. Nobody wants to take him because they all look outside. There is a blizzard going on and it shows no signs of letting up. No one in their right mind would want to go outside. It's just no. Not only are you guaranteed not to get to your destination, you're probably going to get lost. You're going to find your way. You're going to die out there and nobody wants that. So everybody just didn't want to go. And Garen, of course, doesn't understand why nobody seems to care. I mean, I have the vaccine. It's important stuff. And so the villagers finally told him just to get rid of him. Say, you know what? Go try Groper. There's this guy. He's a bread delivery man. He's used to traveling back and forth. He has a sled. If there's anyone in the village that may have a chance to take you, it will probably be him. So Dr. Garen go over to the house of Groper. And after a lot of whining, after a lot of feet stomping, Groper agrees to take him. And so the two set out into the blizzard on a sled that is pulled by horses, but not just regular horses, but these teeny tiny horses. Apparently, there's 50 of these teeny tiny horses. They're size of birds, apparently, that the book keeps trying to remind us. So 50 teeny tiny horses pulling a sled across this blizzard. Anyway, so two very different men. A doctor, as we mentioned, very disagreeable, impatient, that is just I need to get there at all costs, and I don't care what happens to anyone else. Even though it sounds like he's doing it for altruistic reasons, it doesn't seem like it. And he keeps saying it's not Russian to not go or whatever. And then we have the other side. We have Groper, who is a very calm man that nothing seems to faze him. And he takes pride in his teeny tiny horses. It's the only thing that he cares about. And he seemingly leads a pretty simple, kind of a happy life. He come across as like just kind of your sidekick kind of character. But at the end of the story, you will discover that there's more to him. One particular scene that I really, really love that kind of reveal a little bit more about this kind of seemingly kind of a stock character. But despite the setup, Sorokin's Blizzard is not a survival story where the characters have to use all their wits to triumph over all the challenges and hardship that nature throws at them. Yeah, sure, they have to keep themselves alive. But as you can guess from my intro, this book is very much a journey into something very weird, something very strange, very surreal. And yes, it is, as we have been arguing these days, this is definitely a book about the journey. I don't want to spoil anything because it is one of those books that you kind of have to read, like in terms of like sort of the journey part, what they actually come across. There's going to be some weird, clear pyramid shaped stuff lying on the ground. There's going to be a giant snowman that has very disproportionate body parts. And there's some bad drug trips that involve like cauldrons and people digging tunnels underground and all sorts of weird, strange stuff. Throughout the whole thing, even if drugs are not involved, like you're always kind of wondering, like, is this real? Is this imaginary? Is just hypothermia? Like, what is going on? And everything that the two meets on the way is supposed to like leave our characters and also, of course, readers confused and kind of disoriented. Everything everywhere is covered in snow. Everything is white. And it's kind of impossible to find the road. It's impossible to find your bearings, and not just space-wise, but also like time-wise, because the story sort of begins with just sort of what you expect of like a good old Russian kind of story. You got a village, you got a snowstorm, they're setting out on a journey with horses and stuff like that. Yeah, again, like I said, forget about the zombies. But as they encounter all these different things, suddenly they're like, there's some weird, like advanced technology that some of these people have. And you're like, wait, like, is this like some sort of dystopian kind of future Russia? And then just when you think, okay, well, yeah, I think that's what it is. It's happening in like the future, and you think that you figure out the timeline, then Sorokin throws in giants, and you're like, wait, what? Like now are we back in Fantasyland? It's really hard to find your way throughout this, and just like confusing for a reason. And a story that feels like it should be kind of slow because, again, everything looks the same. It's just all snow. It seems like time is just standing still. It's actually a very quick read. I was surprised at how quick this book is, in terms of the pacing of it. It's kind of like a one-sitting type of book. And the only thing that I would say is that I wish I had a better grasp of Russian history and sort of the current Russian political climate and all of that to kind of really understand, I think, like a lot of the metaphors in it. I'm sure a lot of things here is metaphorical. So I wish that I have a better understanding so I can understand all the references. So I definitely want to brush up on that before I tackle his other books, which I am sure is going to be like even more so, more blatant kind of like references and kind of satire in it. And I also can't wait because they're supposed to be so bonkers. I cannot wait to read what else comes up in his other books. So as the translator pointed out in an interview, every Russian writer has a Blizzard story. So if you want to kind of like expand your like Russian literature world beyond your like Dostoevsky, your Tolstoy, your Chekhov, and you move into more contemporary living writers, I highly recommend you checking out Sorokin's work. So this is The Blizzard by Vladimir Sorokin, translated by Jamey Gambrell.
Wonderful. Thank you, Virginia. All I can picture is just teeny tiny horses now. And I really I want it to be made into some sort of visual medium so that I can just see all of these teeny tiny little horses pulling it. That's good. That's good. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing a book with a black cover today. Next, I think we're going to go over to Kareen. Kareen, which color combination I think you had mentioned did you end up picking last night?
Sorry, I'm also very distracted by teeny tiny little horses. And it's also like the amount of them. Like one teeny tiny horse, I think I would be able to quickly move on for, but 50 teeny tiny horses is just so pleasing, right? It's their little hooves. Their little hooves. Okay, focus, Kareen. Focus. All right. Yes. So my favorite color was very easy to choose. Is this a BTS thing? Yeah, take a drink. My favorite color, as you can see from my pens, as you can see from my tumbler, as you can see from my lanyard, and as you can see from my book, is purple. I'm going to go, yeah, it's definitely purple. I've always loved purple, and it has a special meaning for BTS ARMY fans. And so this was a very, very easy pick. And I'm quite happy because I get to talk about a book that I really love that, let me quickly check the publication date, I think might actually be one of my favorite books of the year. Yeah. Whew. So at least I've got one. So the stress on that is done. So again, thank you, Sadie, for choosing this topic. This is a book that I have been reading really slowly. And I think the book kind of lends itself to that. So this was good incentive to kind of like finish it so that I was able to talk about it a little bit more on the podcast. There was a certain point of time in all movies, and I think it still kind of continues today, movies, Hallmark television specials. There's been like a slew of publishing where a high-powered woman executive with a fancy job in the city quits her job to go and start a cupcake business or an embroidery store or a cream cheese artisanal charcuterie board business or a bookstore. The bookstore is the classic. It's the dream that everyone has. It is the dream that our main character has. But if you were looking for kind of like a simple romantic love story with not a lot of depth, just kind of like selling you the dream of what it would be like to not be caught up in the capitalist grind, this book is not that, which is a very, very pleasant surprise. When you kind of hear the description of what the plot is, it very much does seem like it falls into that camp, but it is using the trappings of this to make a critique of late stage capitalism, but for fun. So this is, again, published this year, thank goodness, the purple and gold cover, and it's a beautiful cover. I really like it, of Welcome to the Hyunam-dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-reum, published this year, translated by Shanna Tan, and this is Shanna Tan's first translation. She was mentored by Anton Her, my man, and Julia Sanchez. And so this is her first translation, and I can't wait to see what she kind of chooses to do next. This is also the author's first book, which is very surprising that it is kind of so deftly handled as a debut. And she's written essays before, but this is the first kind of like bookity book that she has done. So this was kind of described by the back a smash hit in Korea, and you can kind of understand why when you read through it. And again, take the plot with what it is, and then I can talk a little bit more about the themes after. Our main character is Young-ju, and she has done everything right. She worked really hard as a child. She studied every night. She did what her parents did. She got into a great university. She graduated with honors. She has an enviable career, high-powered. She has all of the accolades, the big desk, the big house, everything that she should dream of. She's married to a pretty good man, but her life is falling apart. Inside, she feels empty. And not just a normal kind of emptiness, but a clawing, raging emptiness. She realizes that she's not living a life at all. She's just going through the motions like some sort of ghost in her own life. She is burnt out. And she is able only to kind of step back from this when she reaches back into her past and thinks about kind of the last time that she was really happy or the last time that she really felt something. And she thinks back to kind of like a childhood dream that she had to open a bookstore. And so she decides to leave everything behind. She quits her job, she leaves her marriage, and she goes to a tiny little neighborhood to start this bookshop from scratch. Now, she fully understands that bookshops are a pretty risky venture, despite what Hallmark movies would tell you. But she thinks if she can just live happily for 1 or 2 years and keep her business afloat, maybe she could feel more like a person again. And as is kind of like the wonderful trope in these books, it's not always just about the main character. It's also about the other little characters that come into her life. She has Jimmy, who is a coffee roaster who has a terrible husband, but is unable to leave him. There is a mother who is struggling with the fact that her son is maybe not trying as hard as he could in school, and that could affect his entire future. There is Jung-soo, knitter, who donates little coasters for all of the customers of the cozy little bookshop. And my favorite was Min-jun, who is a reluctant barista who graduates again from university and finds himself unable to get a job despite all of his good marks and despite working so hard his entire life. And then at some point just kind of realizes, actually, I don't want to work that hard. And so just becomes a barista. And what I really love about him, he's like, I have no dreams. I have no aspirations. I just want to be. I just want to be. And I connected with him so much. There's really something to find in kind of each of these characters. And so we kind of follow these different points of view, these different people, all kind of struggling with the question of what makes a happy life. And also kind of like the side quest of falling in love with books and talking about a whole bunch of books and building my little like book list as I go through it, which I love. Any book that takes place in a bookshop, that's like half the pleasure of it. But again, what this book is also about is resistance to work and resistance to being involved in the capitalist system. It is really querying, like, what is the point of work? What is the point of working so hard that you have no time for yourself? And yet we're still trapped in the system because we all need to eat and pay rent. It's asking a lot about, do you do what you're good at? Do you do what you love? Do you do what makes you money? And to kind of like what end, like whose expectations are you fulfilling? It does kind of ask that question, like if you have no dreams or aspirations in life, is that such a bad thing? Is this idea of us constantly striving for better or constantly striving to make more money or constantly striving to make us more successful, making us happy? Or is it okay to simply be content? It touches a lot about the ideas of loneliness and success and really, again, that idea of like what makes a happy life? What is the point of our existence? Which again, from this kind of like Hallmark movie trappings is a lot deeper than you would think it would be. And I think that's because the author is kind of using this genre and this format to really explore those questions. There's lovely sections where our main character is interacting with authors or interacting with her book clubs and talking about that kind of generational divide between people of how they approach work and how they approach life, which was a really interesting kind of glimpse into like the different generational societies within Korea. The older people saying, well, we have to work hard, we have to work hard, we have to work hard. And then the younger generation asking, for what? And it was so interesting. So if you are a fan of maybe on the fiction side of things, I'd say it's very close to Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And Virginia pointed out a book that I do have on pre-order. Welcome to the Marigold Mind Laundry, which is coming out, I think, later this year. That is kind of a view on this, except that it takes place at a laundromat. Love the expansion of that. And then also, if you are interested on the nonfiction side, what I think the author is kind of like grappling with, if you were a fan of Do Nothing, The Refusal of Work, The Theory and Practice of Resistance to Work by David Frayne, Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by the Nagoski Sisters, or The Cure for Burnout by Emily Ballesteros. If you're kind of interested in asking yourself these big questions about what is the purpose of life and, you know, how we can make a happy life in a system that is not set up for it, I would really recommend this book, as well as the other ones mentioned in this book itself. If you're looking for something that encourages you to kind of move and think slowly, to kind of like carve out a time for yourself on a Sunday morning to very slowly make that cup of coffee and just sit on the couch with your own thoughts, or maybe a very stupid variety show, and just kind of like enjoy rest, then this book is such a warm and cozy and comforting space. It's a book that just kind of when you're quite stressed, or at least when I am, my shoulders kind of go up somewhere near my ears and I find myself clenching everything. And reading this book is just like someone gently pushing all the stress out of you and saying, yep, things are not great, but just take a deep breath. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, I would absolutely recommend Welcome to the Hyunam-dong Bookshop by Hwang Bo-reum, translated by Shanna Tan.
Really is a beautiful cover. I love that cover. I think that while our country and society is very, very focused on capitalism, I think that it is starting to come out more that maybe working all the time is not the best thing for life and for relationships and for happiness. So that is a good reminder for everyone. I got that reminder this morning as my toddler looked at me and said, "Mommy, we're going to stay home today." And I had to explain to her that, unfortunately, we could not. We could not. So thank you, Corrine, for sharing that book. We're going to go on to our existential question, which we're actually going to switch things from thinking about our favorite color to thinking about our least favorite color. So I'm curious what my book friend's least favorite color is. And if you found a book with that color, would you not read it based on that color alone?
Yeah. It's not that I wouldn't read it. It's that, okay, my least favorite color is yellow. Gold is fine. I love gold. I hate yellow covers. There's something about it that's so garish and so like, look at me, that if I often read on the SkyTrain, or I read in public, or whatever. I refuse to read yellow books in public because they're too loud. They're way too loud. And I feel like it just kind of like draws, and I know why the book publishers do it, because it draws the eyes, like all the attention gets focused on that. And I wonder if there are people not like sitting there judging my book taste as I'm trying to like enjoy this on the SkyTrain. So for example, Butter, the one that I'm reading right now, I can only read at home because it's too bright, too yellow. It's like screaming at me.
You know, it's funny, Karina. I think we're very much on the same color page right now, because I was also going to say yellow. And I think for me, it's because when I put yellow on, I look very, very, very sick. It just doesn't work with my skin tone. It just doesn't work with my coloring. And so I tend to avoid yellow in that sense. And so I think I've just avoided yellow a lot. So I don't know if I would necessarily not read a book, but I do understand that kind of loudness and garishness. I remember in high school learning that certain colors are supposed to make people do certain things. And yellow is one of the colors that is supposed to make you want to buy things and supposed to make you want to spend money. And I don't know if this is true, but I heard that that's why Subway is yellow, because when you go in, it makes you want to spend money. And I don't know how true that is. I am not sure, but
Yes. So that is the color theory. Absolutely fascinating. I learned about it on a podcast called Sawbones, which is a misguided tale of medicine. Yeah. You're nodding because it's a great podcast. And they talk about this idea of color theory, like being in rooms of certain colors, like makes us feel certain ways, or like makes us do certain things, which is pretty much hokum. But it was very influential at a time in the way that like prisons were painted pink at some point, and like hospitals are painted certain things, but there's actually no scientific basis in it, but it's very interesting.
yes, I have not listened to Sawbones, but my husband loves Sawbones, so I'm familiar with it that way. Anything McElroy. All right, Virginia, what is your least favorite color, and would you refuse to read a book if it was that color?
I don't think I'll refuse any book of any color. Like, it doesn't bother me at all. And let me introduce you to e-reader, Corrine, if you don't want people to see your cover. Anyway, but yes, I have no issues with like books with whatever cover. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I will read whatever if I want to read a book. But it's weird because I just keep thinking, because Sadie, before we talk about this, you mentioned pink, right? Like, you're just guessing that pink is mine. And it's not. I don't think it is, because when I think about like, if I'm going to buy a jacket, or can buy some pants, shoes, buy a notebook, buy, I don't know, like a car, which color would I least likely to buy? Green. Sorry, Emma. I know, Emma, this is your favorite color, green. I don't like green. There's something about green that I really, really don't like. I don't mind them on trees. I don't mind them on my like kale or whatever, but like that's fine. I don't have no issues with those kind of, but I don't like green. There's something I really, really don't like about green. I think. I don't know why. Like, yeah.
Note to self, never buy Virginia anything green for Christmas. Now we know.
Is it every shade of green?
Well, because so the weird thing is that Fiona would never let me forget what I said about blue on this show. You can go back to that episode when we talk about blue. But like, I don't like blue. I don't care. Well, I mean, neutral about blue. I do not like green. But when I combine those two colors, like teal, turquoise, which I love for whatever reason, like if it weren't for black, I think that would be my other color. Like I would pick those. But I do not like green.
It's very interesting how we are drawn to colors and then not drawn to others. Like it's fascinating. I find it very fascinating. Well, thank you for sharing, Corrine and Virginia. I will be talking about my book next. And the book that I ended up reading, it has been on my TBR for quite a while. I talked about it on one of my most anticipated lists last year, I believe, but it wasn't currently on my radar until I did my usual Google themed search for books with such and such color. And this is why I also feel like you and me are on the same page, because I did a search for purple covered books because one of my favorite colors is purple. The other one is teal and turquoise. And so I was trying to decide which one. And I did a search for purple covered books first. And this book came up. And so it was a natural choice since I had been wanting to read it anyways. So that is the book I chose. And it is Ink Blood Sister Scribe by Emma Törzs. And our story revolves around two sisters, Esther and Joanna. Now, the sisters have always known that magic exists. Their father, Abe, has been a rare magic book collector for their entire lives. He can sense the magic in books, he can hear it and feel it, and speak the spells that are inside them. Now, these spells protect, these spells communicate, some of the spells are just for fun. And these magic books are Abe's entire life, and he will sacrifice anything to keep his collection safe. He keeps their house in Vermont very, very heavily protected. He sets wards every single night, and the wards essentially hide their house from view of anyone whose blood is not included when he sets the wards. He won't take any chances. And this is because Abe knows how dangerous magic can be and how coveted these books are. He knows this because when Esther was a toddler, her mother Isabel was killed for their book collection. And so Abe sets the wards and keeps Joanna and Esther safe but isolated in Vermont. That is until Esther's 18th birthday, when Abe tells her that in order to keep their family safe, to keep Joanna safe, Esther must leave and never come back. Because while Joanna inherited their father's ability to hear magic and speak spells, Esther is immune to magic altogether, immune to the wards that are placed on their house. And if she is immune, then she can be found. And if she can be found, then their entire family can be found. And so Abe tells her that she must move and must never stop moving, that it isn't safe to stay more than a year in any one place. Not wanting to put Joanna in danger, but knowing that she can never truly explain to her why she must leave and why their father is putting this horribly big responsibility onto an 18-year-old, Esther leaves. And every year in November, she moves to a new city, a new country, a new continent. But it's been 10 years since she went on the run, and 2 years since her father Abe was killed somehow by one of his books. And Esther doesn't want to run anymore. She is sick of running. She's working on a research base in Antarctica as an engineer, and she's happy. It's quiet. It's kind of peaceful. And she has Pearl, this vibrant and sweet and loving woman from Australia who she has fallen in love with. And she doesn't want to run again. She doesn't want to leave someone else. She doesn't want to leave Pearl with no explanation and leave herself with a broken heart. And honestly, who is going to come to Antarctica to find her? And so she stays. Now, back in Vermont, Joanna has taken over their father's life, and not in a good way. Ever since Esther left, abandoning her with no explanation, and her mother was told to leave by her father, and her father died, Joanna lives by herself, allowing no one, still not her mother, into the house. She continues to set the wards each night, and she spends her days trying and trying to create her own spells, trying to turn her own blood into the ink that she knows is used to write the spells in the books. No matter what she does, nothing works. So she sinks deeper into isolation and depression, leaving her house to occasionally visit her mother and maybe buy a new trashy romance book. However, when her mother tricks her and threatens to stop her from being able to set the wards around her house, Joanna is forced to do something that she promised her father she would never, ever do. And that is to let her mother back inside their house. However, it turns out that it's not to burn their entire collection of books, which is what Joanna feared she was wanting to do. Cecily instead uses a strange form of mere magic to send a coded message to someone, along with a postcard from Esther. A postcard that reveals exactly where Esther can be found. Nicholas. Nicholas has spent his entire life being coddled and protected. It's not a bad life, per se. He lives in a huge mansion in England. He wants for nothing. He has bodyguards and gets to attend fancy parties with the country's and the world's most important people. He's kind of, in a way, like royalty. That is, if royalty was permanently anemic because they were continually forced to use their own blood to make magic ink to write magic spells in magic books. See, Nicholas is a scribe, the only scribe left in the world. And in his blood is the ability to create magic, an ability that Nicholas knows is extremely sought after. And he knows this because when he was 13 and he begged his uncle to give him just the tiniest bit of freedom, it resulted in him being kidnapped. Now, his uncle was able to rescue him in time, but the kidnappers took one of his eyes and left him permanently terrified to ever leave his uncle's protection again. So he continues to do what his uncle Richard and Richard's partner Merrim says, continuing to bleed himself dry to write spells for his uncle to sell to the highest bidder. But then Merrim gives Nicholas a strange veiled message, a message that leads him to uncover some very disturbing information about his uncle, and something that his uncle has been planning for years. With this new information, Nicholas is forced to flee alongside his bodyguard Collins and search out the two people who are also linked to this disturbing mystery, although they don't really know it yet. And that is Esther and Joanna. And this mystery will reveal information about all of them and the lives that they thought they understood, and will change all of their lives. I really, really enjoyed this book. I think that if I had read it last year, it would have definitely been on my top picks for the year. I absolutely loved it. It was not exactly what I expected, but I think that it was in a good way. I expected it to focus quite heavily on Joanna and Esther and kind of their relationship and them finding their way back to each other and figuring out why Esther had to leave. And that's definitely a big part of it. I did not expect the storyline with Nicholas and his bodyguard Collins. I don't think they even really mentioned that in any of the descriptions, which I find interesting. When the kind of the new character came into it, I was quite surprised. The book had a very big Bourne Identity feel to it, which I have to admit, I absolutely love the Bourne movies. I absolutely love it. I've never read the books, but I love the movies. I don't know if it's a Matt Damon thing. I don't know what it is, but I absolutely love the Bourne movies. I like kind of that high action, the mysterious like organization that like controls everything and this kind of like splinter group that's working against them. And I like kind of the idea where our protagonists are kind of brought into it and learn all of this information that they changes their view of the world, and they have to try to process this information while also trying to bring down this horrible organization. And so I love that. And this book had a very heavy dose of all of that, but magic as well, which I mean, how do you go wrong with that? So I think that if you really like that kind of book, if you love Bourne Identity, if you like that kind of high action stuff, but you also enjoy that kind of hint of magic, it definitely kind of focused a lot around power and who has the power and how these organizations get all the power and use that so that no one else can have it, and kind of breaking down those kind of power structures, and all on the shoulders of like a 20-something group of people, which I think I appreciated because they weren't super young when this happened as well. They're all like 28, 29. And so it's not like a group of teens having to bring down, like they're established. They can make some real life adult decisions in these situations. But yeah, so I would say if you like Bourne Identity, if you like that kind of plot line, then I would definitely recommend Ink Blood Sister Scribe by Emma Törzs. There is sadly at this point no sequel planned, which makes me very sad, but maybe a film or TV adaptation, which I think would go really, really well. All right. Well, that is all for our color books today. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Let us know in the comments if you listen on Facebook, let us know if you judge a book by its color, or if there's any colors. Hey, it's a good line. Come on. I had to say it. Or if there are any colors that you would flat out refuse to read if a book is a certain color. So thank you to Virginia and Kareen for humoring me in my color discussion today. Thank you to all of our listeners, and please tune in again next week for another episode of Keep It Fictional. We will see you then.
Thank you for listening. If you like our show, please tell a fellow book lover about it. You can find a list of all the books we discussed in our show notes. Join us next week for another fun book chat. Until then, keep it fictional.